everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing another installment of what I like to call Music Monday. And today's Music Monday, we are going to be talking about the albums, songs, all the things that you should be listening to this spring. It's actually hilarious that I'm filming this right now because currently there's a blizzard outside my window. But that's Midwestern spring for ya. But we're just gonna pretend that it's green outside and the birds are chirping and there's beautiful flowers blooming. We're just gonna pretend that that's what's going on outside, and we're gonna talk about spring music. So I say without further ado, we get on into it. First up, we have Hozier's self-titled album. I love this album so much, and Hozier himself, I feel like, just has a little bit more spring vibes. You could honestly even argue that Shrike is also a spring album, because Would That I is on that album, and literally Would That I is like the definition of spring. I mean, they even used that as like a TikTok audio with like the I love being a woman from Anne with an E. Well, and if you've seen my previous video, which you haven't, it'll be linked up here somewhere. I did a films you should watch this spring, and spoiler alert, and of Green Gables was in there. So as I was saying, Hozier's self-titled album is very spring to me because of songs like From Eden and like Real People Do. Those songs just like get me in the mood for spring. I literally, on my spring playlist, which I will link down below for you if you'd like to check that out, have a handful of songs from this album on there because it sets the tone for spring, in my opinion. And especially like something about spring's very artsy and like poetic because it's like a new beginnings transitional season. And obviously Hozier is the definition of poetic. Like his lyricism is just so beautiful, like it's so amazing, and I just feel like it has that springness to it because of that. Now moving on to our next album, I think this is so spring, like because it has a little bit of folkiness to it, and I think folk music, like the folk genre in general, I feel like is also just very spring. Like I have a lot of folk stuff on my spring playlist for that reason. But the next album is Moss by Maya Hawke. I loved this album when it came out. I still love it. And pretty much a majority of this album is on my spring playlist because it's so light and beautiful, and once again lyricism is very poetic, and I just feel like it sets the tone. Specifically Backup Plan and Mermaid Bar, I feel like those are very spring, and Luna Moth, I feel like that's also very spring as well. And then her song Cricket off of Blush, I think is also, it could also be summer, but I feel like it also kind of is that like spring to transition or spring to summer transition kind of vibes. But, and once again, you could also probably argue that Blush is also like a spring album, but I think out of the two, I think Moss is more spring. And also the title of the album is Moss, and Moss is very, very spring. So need I say more? I just realized I kept forgetting to say what my favorite tracks off of each album are, so let me do that. My favorite track off of Hozier's self-titled is Like Real People Do, and then my favorite track off of Moss is Mermaid Bar. So if you haven't listened to either of those albums, I recommend starting with those ones because they're my favorite and I think they're really great. Next up, we have Lemon Boy by Cavetown. Lemons in themselves, I feel like, is very spring and summery, and the fact that it's kind of like this soft indie acoustic vibe-ish, I feel like it really does kind of fit into that springness. Specifically Green. Oh my gosh, Green is such a spring song. And actually I think that's one of my favorite off of the album. Green and 888 or 888, I don't know. Those are my favorite. But also, if you haven't heard Lemon Boy, that's really surprising because I feel like Lemon Boy was everywhere in like, what, like 2017, 2018, I don't know. But like, that's also a really good song to listen to in the spring because it's just, it has, I don't know, it has that imagery of like in a garden. Like I just feel like it's very spring vibes. The next album on our list is Fleet Fox's self-titled project. I love this album. I need it on vinyl stat. In fact, all the albums listed, I do not have on vinyl yet. and they all are on my wish list. So I desperately need these for sure. But Fleet Foxes is one of those timeless, I guess, like where it's just like you can put it on anytime, anywhere, and it slaps. It hits every single time. But I think if I had to categorize it into a season, for me it would be spring, because there's something so fresh and light about this album. Like Oliver James is like such a like spring song in my mind. And I mean, we have to point out the obvious, Ragged Wood. I mean, come on. That's like a super spring song. And just like front to back, it's just very beautiful with like the harmonies and just the instrumentation. Like overall, it's just like, this is an album that I will just put on repeat as spring begins to like get me into the mood. The only track on here that I don't listen to during spring is White Winter Hymnal, because that in my mind, well, winter is literally in the title, but like I grew up listening to that song and we would listen to it like kind of like mid-fall. That's like usually when we would listen to it. So for some reason in my mind, it's more of like a fall transition into winter song. And so that's the only one that's not exactly spring to me, but the rest of the album I think is very much those vibes. And I forgot to mention, my favorite track off of Fleet Foxes is probably Ragged Wood. Next up was one of my favorite, not only albums, but artists growing up, kind of like in middle school, and that is Mindy Glidhill and her album Pocketful of Poetry. This album was on repeat in middle school, that and Anchor, because I don't know, something about her music I just really connected with and just really love, and I still listen to these albums today because they're just so beautiful and nostalgic. It's kind of like a soft folky pop vibe. If you've never heard of her, I highly recommend you check out either Pocketful of Poetry or Anchor, because those are like her most like popular albums. But Pocketful of Poetry is this beautiful, cutesy, think very twee, think very like Zooey Deschanel, twee era. That's kind of sonically what her albums are in my opinion. And twee is very spring. So yes, of course I'm going to put this on the list because I just think it screams spring. The song specifically that I feel like is very spring is Finding Home. The imagery and the lyricism, I feel like little like fairy tale-esque imagery in there, I feel like is very spring. Trouble in the World No More, I feel like is also a track that's kind of like this fun little bouncy spring vibe. And like there's a lot of like slower songs on this album, but I think they also have that very sweet fairy tale childlike vibe. Like two of the songs, Honey and Bedtime Song, like both of those I feel like are also very like sweet and childlike. Childlike wonder and fairy tales are very spring in my mind, and so I feel like those are also tracks that are very spring. Now it is very hard to pick a favorite off of this album because of how much I would listen to it front to back. I would say Picture Show or Finding Home. I think those are my top two off of this album. Picture Show was like my #1 rom-com love song that I listened to on repeat, and then Finding Home, as I said, is just a very cutesy imagery and also just very sweet. So definitely recommend you go listen to those tracks if you give this album a listen. Now in the same vein of Cave Town, we have Chloe Morinando, is that how you pronounce it? I think so. Anyways, her album Rabbit Hearted. Well, for one, the album cover, duh, that's literally spring vibes, hello. But also Love Notes and Little Moth are on my spring playlist, and so I feel like I had to add this album because I feel like, once again, it's like this soft, sweet bedroom indie pop, and like, I don't know, I feel like it just fits the spring vibes, not only because of the imagery of the album cover, but also just in the lightness and chillness, I guess, of the album sonically and lyrically. And then my favorite track off of this album is Love It. Now moving on to probably one of the most obvious picks would be Woodland by the Paper Kites. Now if you've even slightly been on TikTok, you probably have heard Bloom, and that is like one of the #1 songs I listen to at the start of spring because, once again, I just feel like it sets the tone. The like guitar, I just feel like sonically it just feels so sweet and light and spring-like, and I don't know, I love it. I love Bloom. That is my hands down favorite off of it. But also Woodland, the title track, also great. And also, similar to the previous album, the album cover also gives that imagery because it's just a bunch of like trees. And yeah, something about it is just very spring and lovely and wonderful. Next album is To Learn More by Leith Ross. I love Leith. I think she is so incredibly talented lyrically. Like, I just fell in love with her when obviously she came out with We'll Never Have Sex. I mean, obviously that's like one of her biggest songs of all time, and I just loved watching like all of her storytelling and her songwriting like on the clips that she would post on TikTok. And so when she released this album, I was like super excited about it. Something about the sound of this album is just once again kind of very light and very like sweet, and I feel like it fits that spring vibe. Specifically You on My Arm, which is my favorite off the album. I love that song. I listen to it all the time. That song I feel like is very spring. And Musicbox, oh my gosh, how did I not lead with that? Musicbox I think is the most spring track off this album, because like that one was also like popular on TikTok for a while, so you probably have heard that too. But if you haven't, definitely go take a listen, because it's such a beautiful song. And it has that imagery, that very fairy tale, secret garden like kind of imagery, and I feel like it fits spring so well. And this album overall is just great, so definitely go give it a listen if you have not listened to it yet. Next up is my other favorite girly pop, Lizzie McAlpine, with her album Give Me a Minute. Once again, something about this to me just is very spring-esque. Specifically the track that I think is like makes me feel that way is To the Mountains, because that is so spring to me, because it has once again that very nature like imagery in there, and I feel like it works for spring. However, my favorite track on this album is Mean Something, because that's me. Literally she took my diary entries and made a song about it, which is so crazy. But yeah, literally me and Mean Something are like this, okay? I love that song so much. And also that one also I feel like sonically has spring vibes too, so. But anyways, if you have only ever listened to 5 Seconds Flat, I recommend you check out some of her older stuff. Give Me a Minute is such a great project, and I desperately want it on vinyl, but I am not willing to pay those crazy, ridiculous prices for that vinyl. So maybe someday, if she ever decides to re-release it, I'll be able to have it in my grasp. And then moving on to the most on the nose pick, and that is Spring EP by Wallows. I mean, there you have it, folks. The album's called Spring, and there's flowers on the album cover artwork. No, but in all seriousness, I also feel like there's a lot of tracks on this that are so chill. Like Let the Sun In, I feel like is one of those songs that's also perfect for that like spring into summer transition. It can work for both spring and summer, and like I just love it. That's my favorite track off the album. But I think the rest of the EP also has that like 80s synth-ish vibes, but it's not enough to be like, oh, this is like more coming of age in the summer. Like I feel like 1980s horror film could maybe be a little bit more summer for sure, but I don't know. I feel like the other tracks on this EP, I feel like lean a little bit more spring in my mind. And we are finally at our last pick of the video, and that is Landmark by Hippocampus. I feel like once again this is another album that could be argued for both spring and summer, but I feel like there's a handful of them that I listen to more in spring. Like The Way It Goes for some reason is like so spring in my mind, and Vines is very spring to me, and in fact that may be my favorite off of the album. But this is one of those albums where it's like there's no skips. Like the whole entire album front to back is just so good that it's like it's really hard to pick a favorite, because it's such a great album. I also feel like Buttercup and Vacation, I feel like those are also like the spring into summer transition vibes, and like I just love it. I just love listening to it. I'll listen to it any time of year, but I feel like once again, I feel like it's leaning a little bit more spring than it is summer. And as I said, it's incredibly hard to pick a favorite off of this album. However, I think I may have to go with Vines. Vacation might be a close second. I don't know, guys. But then also Way It Goes like mentions Wisconsin, and that's like a big deal for me. So I'm like, hey, maybe that's my favorite. But anyways, it's a good album. Go listen to it. This is another one that I really want on vinyl, but I I'm one of those insane people that doesn't like getting the standard black of albums. Like, I need to get a colored pressing. And in fact, all the standard black that I have is against my will. It's solely of the, I need to be able to listen to this in a vinyl format, so I'm settling for this until I can get a colored pressing. Anyways, that was the last album of my list of spring albums that you should be listening to this spring. I will have my Musicboard list and also my Spotify playlist for all of this linked in the description if you'd like to check that out. And also, if you want to follow me on Musicboard and Letterboxd, that'll always be linked down below, as well as TikTok, all that jazz. But thank you for joining me for yet another installation of Music Monday. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite thing, whether that's a song or an album to listen to in the spring, is, so that I can have more to add to my spring playlist, and we can share all our music taste so we can all have the best spring playlist. Otherwise, I'll see you all in the next one, because that's all, folks.